Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi, my name is Raninta Salwa Prilia Ginano, and my student number is 2019-05-100-09. And today I would like to discuss about my research under the title of Sexual Harassment, Violence, and Awareness in Indonesia. So, let's begin. Alright, so nowadays, sexual harassment issues seem to become more common in Indonesia. So, whenever we open social media such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., encountering sexual harassment case seem to be a daily feed. For example, the recent sexual harassment case done by a famous figure named Gofar Ilman. However, in the current years, the number of sexual harassment cases have rose sharply, along with the numbers of campaigns against it, especially in social media. This is also due to the fact that new types of sexual harassment have emerged. So, according to the 2020 report released by the National Women's Commission Against Violence, uh, a lot of questionnaires from them that they distributed decreased with the percentage of almost 100%, and this makes them conclude that the numbers of sexual harassment cases in Indonesia is actually rising instead of decreasing. With the concerning numbers of sexual harassment cases towards women and girls, it is important to tackle the issue as soon as possible. However, with the lack of data of sexual harassment cases and violence towards women and girls, along with the lack of report research and participant, tackling this issue will be challenging. Moreover, there is also lack of data in measuring the society's understanding towards sexual harassment and violence. There is also issue that not every citizens of Indonesia receive the questionnaire regarding sexual harassment and violence issue. This study concludes to analyze A, society's knowledge in what is sexual harassment and the forms, B. How common is for the society, especially for females, to encounter sexual harassment in their daily life? And C. The awareness of the society towards sexual harassment and violence issue and the correlations of sex education with it. So, the research questions of this research will be: one, what type of or forms of sexual harassment is the most common to be encountered by the society? And two, how aware is the society on sexual harassment and violence case? And three, how does sex education correlates with sexual harassment and violent cases? Now let's move on to literature review, starting from theoretical framework. So, starting from the definition of sexual harassment. So, sexual harassment can be defined as the unwelcome act of conducting sexual nature by one party without the consent of others, in which make the victim feel humiliated, intimidated, terrified, and offended. So, sexual harassment comes in many forms, such as catcalling, staring inappropriately, non-consensual touching or kissing, sexual insults, suggestive comment or jokes, sexually explicit medias that is not consensual to all parties, intrusive questions or sexual related questions towards someone's private life or body, to bigger and more concerning form, which are sexual assault, stalking, and rape. So, when, where, and who? So, according to a researcher named Marciela Sumera, in her research, due to its vast range, sexual harassment and violence can happen anywhere, anytime, and in any form. First, sexual harassment that happen in family environment. The perpetrators are usually the family members such as mother, father, uncles, aunt, cousins, and even siblings. Second, sexual harassment that happen in work and educational institution environment. Usually the perpetrator is someone in a higher rank in a occupation. This applies in work field and the victim is usually someone who has lower rank than them. While in educational institution, it could be the perpetrator could be the lecturer, the staff, and even your fellows, classmates, and peers. And third, sexual harassment and violence that occur in public places, such as road, public transportation, market, etc. The perpetrators in public places are usually someone who is unknown to the victim, or in short, strangers. And the researcher also implicitly stated that there is lack of awareness that caused sexual harassment to emerge, such as, for example, the old school mindset that if a woman wears tight clothes, then it is her fault that she got raped. So there is a lack of awareness which only happens when there is lack of sex education. So that is what the researcher implied in her research. So next, empirical review. So in terms of empirical review, the Marciela Sumeru stated in her research journal that the victims of sexual harassment is usually females instead of males, even though in some cases there are also male that suffered sexual harassment, but it is far more or less than females being the victim of sexual harassment. And this is also due to the fact that female is often seen as less superior than male. Thus, the blame are often being put on the female side or the victim side instead of male. Usually, males are always most of the time they are excused when they conducted sexual harassment to someone, especially if it's female. Meanwhile, regarding the society's awareness in sex education actually correlates with sex harassment cases because, again, the absence of sex education creates lack of awareness. However, sex education in Indonesia is still considered low. This is due to the fact that parents in Indonesia often perceive sex education as a taboo subject. So it creates misconceptions of sex education as it is being viewed as subject that only talks about sex positions, thus making parents reject sex educations and not giving their children the right to learn sex education, in which creates the absence of sex education, leads to lack of awareness, and the lack of awareness triggers the numbers of sexual harassment cases. So next, the methods and instrument of this research. Next, this research will be using the qualitative method to seek understanding of participants' view and their knowledge of sexual harassment issue and awareness related to sex educations. The researcher, as in I, conducted interview through an online platform called Zoom with a total of 3 participants. 2 of them are females and one of them is male. So the questions are composed in 11 questions and the participants must be able to answer the questions. So moving on to the criteria of the participants. So the criteria of the participant in order to be able to participate in this research is: first, they have to be people in the age range or age group of 17 to 26 years old. Second, they are willing to discuss about sensitive and possibly triggering topic and issue. Next. So let's discuss the findings of this research. So, the first findings of this research is forms of sexual harassment encountered. So, the first participant stated that sexual harassment that happened to her is catcalling, and it almost happened to her all the time when she goes to public places and when she's in front of boys. So, she has also experienced non-consensual touching in public transportation called angkot by a stranger. The second participant stated that she has encountered a lot of sexual harassment in any kind of forms, be it experiencing it herself or encountering it in social media, newspaper, her environment, etc. She also stated that she was harassed by a stranger in public transportation on her way to home recently. The third participant, however, stated that he has never experienced sexual harassment because he is on the opposite side of this sexual spectrum. However, he have heard several encounters of sexual harassment, which is catcalling. So he also stated that 2 months ago, in an alley, he witnessed a woman was being catcalled by a man. Both the perpetrator and the victims are strangers to him. Therefore, in general, the participants often encounter sexual harassment in the form of catcalling, followed by non-consensual touching, and the perpetrator are most common found as a strangers, and it often happen in public places. Second finding of this research is people awareness and understanding on sexual harassment issue. The first participant stated that she actually knows all of sexual harassment because it commonly happens in our society and her personal life. The second participant stated that she is well informed and she actually have known most of the sexual harassment forms. And the third participant stated that he have heard all the sexual harassment actions that the researcher asked to him, and he he is also well informed. So in general, the participants are well informed and understand and also aware of sexual harassment cases. Then it's different types of forms and it's different types and forms. Next to the third finding, sex education and awareness. The first participant stated that she uh, she agreed with sex education because it teaches people about consent and the consequences of their actions. The second participant stated that she strongly supports sex education because children nowadays are too brave in projecting. Oh, sorry. Because children nowadays are very open and very uh, too brave in projecting their sexual desire that it is harmful to society and people around them. Thus, sex education will help in preventing sex harassment. And the third participant stated that he supports sex education because when someone supports sex education, they are more open to other gender experiences. So, by knowing the other gender experiences, sex education will help genders to respect each other. But unfortunately, the culture of openness in Indonesia is still not very welcome towards sex education because it is a sensitive issue. So let's move to discussion. So the research that was conducted shows that first, Catcalling is the most common sexual harassment to be encountered by the participants, followed by non-consensual touching. This is proven by the fact that 3 out of 3 participants encountered catcalling, while 2 out of 3 encountered non-consensual touching. Second, the participants are generally aware of different types of and forms of sexual harassment, as they have stated previously in the findings that they are well aware, informed, and they have knowledge with the different types and forms of sexual harassment. And then third, the absence of sex education can raise the number of sex harassment cases, as absence of sex education can trigger lack of awareness, in which it can lead into rising number of sex harassment cases. It has been implicitly stated in the participants' answer for the sex education and awareness that sex education will help raise awareness in which can prevent sex harassment cases. So there is another study that support the findings of the researcher of this research. So it is called Phenomena Catcalling sebagai bentuk pelecehan seksual secara verbal terhadap perempuan di Jakarta by Angeline Hidayat and Yugi Setianto. So this research stated that according to the sexual harassment survey in public room in Jakarta, females suffered more sexual harassment than male. Although there are cases of male being sexually harassed, it is far lesser than of female being sexually harassed, and amongst those females who have been sexually harassed by people, most of the sexual harassment that they've experienced is catcalling, followed by comments about their bodies and non-consensual touching and being eyed on. This proved that this point proved the research about catcalling and the non-consensual touching. So the research also stated that the reason why catcalling is very common in the society is because there is still low understanding of catcalling as a form of sexual harassment, leading it to be normalized amongst the society. This research also proved the author's point that the absence of sex education can raise the number of sex harassment cases. However, this research only laid out the data in Jakarta, so it did not present the accurate cases number in Indonesia as a whole. Next. Okay, the case related to sexual harassment and violence in Indonesia is rising in a concerning rate. So people from the age range of 17 to 26 generally understand and are aware of different types of sexual harassment and violence. Catcalling and non-consensual touching are the most common types to be encountered by the participants and by the group age of 17 to 26. Public places is the most common location of this action to happen, and stranger is the most common perpetrator in the sexual harassment cases. And sex education is also generally accepted by participants, as stated by them and their own reasonings in the findings why sex education is accepted by the participants. And this is also due to the fact that sex education is a key in raising awareness in sexual harassment issue and as solution to tackle the sexual harassment issue. This research will give insight to the reader about the sexual harassment issue in Indonesia. It can also be used as a starting point in digging more about sexual harassment issue, as it can serve as a starting point to begin a research with related topic. However, the weakness of this research is that its findings can't represent the entire country Indonesia, and it has yet to dig into sexual harassment issue, lack of awareness, and sex education in depth. Thus, this research can still be developed intensively. These topics should be researched more as the sexual harassment and violence issues are rising sharply, and not many studies are able to cover all areas related to this. And that is all from me. I apologize if there are mispronunciations or there is misinformation in this presentation. I hope this research and this video will be useful to whoever who's reading it or watching this video. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.